Chaos on Capitol Hill today. The details coming up on Hunter Biden's arrival at the Capitol building. Once again, to tell the American people he doesn't have to follow the law. Coming up on this show, joining moments from now, we'll have Senator Roger Marshall. Congressman Pat Fallon will be here at the bottom of the hour at 3:30. Then Congressman Brad Wenstrup is here at 4:30. We talked to him about 2 days of questioning of Anthony Fauci, who suddenly doesn't remember the beginning of the pandemic. Must be that long COVID. And then Brandon Judd, the Border Patrol Union president, will join us at 5 o'clock today. We'll talk about Alejandro Mayorkas, whose impeachment process begins today in the House. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. That's right, an immense amount of news developing today. We'll get to all of it. But I want to begin with Alejandro Mayorkas because yesterday in the United States Senate, there was a resolution introduced for a vote of no confidence in Alejandro Mayorkas. This is the House begins its impeachment proceedings against him. Joining me now to discuss is the senator who introduced that no confidence resolution. Roger Marshall is on the phone. Senator, good to have you back with us, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Vince, Happy New Year's to you and your listeners. And by the way, Brandon Judd's going to be a great interview. I met on the border with him a couple of times, and your listeners need to really stay tuned. He's a sharp guy and knows exactly what's really happening at the border.
Yeah, and I want to get that firsthand perspective from him and from you on what's really going on in our government right now when it comes to our border, because the Biden administration keeps saying in a variety of ways, oh, we're working on it, it's bad everywhere, and we're doing great work. But that's not the case, is it, Senator?
No, not at all. No, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. It's very clear to me, and I'm not sure I even understood the depth of this a month ago, but it's very clear based upon what the Democrats said on the Senate floor yesterday, the conversations that I'm having in the hallway, is that you and I perceive the problem at the border as a national security problem. First and foremost, it's a national security problem. They see it as an immigration opportunity. They want this chaos. They like it just the way it is. Being able to get 10,000 or 12,000 people every day into this country, people who are going to go to one state and give them an extra seat in the House or maybe flip a purple district. That's what their goal is. They want to do everything they can to gum this up. But to me, this has always been a national security issue.
It really is. And the vulnerability here is immense. I mean, you've got all the people who are on the terrorist watch list who are pouring across our border and being released into the country. And also you have all of the Americans who are dying due to the fentanyl. I mean, the cartels have never been better off than they are with Biden as president.
Right, yeah. The cartels have gotten very, very wealthy. We've lost 300,000 young Americans to fentanyl or opioid poisoning. We have 1.7 million gotaways that have entered the country. And you just would assume if you're a gotaway, if you're a person that came in and was able to evade the Border Patrol, there's probably a reason. You're probably not on the up and up. And then you talk about 1.5 million people that the president's paroled. And again, none of these people have been vetted before they came into this country. There's a reason the FBI director says everywhere he looks, he sees blinking red lights. That we should be in fear, that we better have our head on a swivel and making sure what's going on around us right now.
So yesterday you introduced a no confidence vote, and it was blocked. Am I right about that?
Yeah, yes, sir. So we introduced our vote of no confidence. We thought it would be a good time to do this, to condemn Secretary Mayorkas, maybe put some wind beneath the sails of the House as they started their impeachment trial. I think what's interesting, all it takes is one senator to object to this and stop the process. So we had half a dozen Republican senators show up and say, this is why we should fire Andrew Mayorkas today. And by the way, send a message to Joe Biden that you're next in 300 days. Only one senator had the guts to show up. And he's a good man. Senator Tom Carper's a good person. But all he wanted to talk about was the humanitarian side of this, that we need to open our doors, that these poor people in their countries, and I feel for them. I've done humanitarian medical mission work around the world. I do feel for these people. But I took an oath to make sure that our families were safe and secure. And Secretary Mayorkas took an oath to secure our borders, to maintain operational control. He's broken the law over and over again it's time to impeach him.
Yeah, but even on the humanitarian front, my empathy is disappearing entirely on this issue, and that's because we're not enforcing the border, and most of the people who seem to be crossing are military-aged males from every country on the planet. This seems to have a lot less to do with any particular humanitarian crisis happening in some other country, and everything to do with Joe Biden deciding to kick the gates open and let anybody who wants to come in.
Right. Everyone's got their own motives. This country spends almost $90 billion a year helping other countries through USAID. We do polio vaccinations. We do food for peace, all sorts of things. So I think that's the humanitarian part that we should be doing. If we let the gates all open right now, Gallup said there would be 150 million people would love to enter our country right now, and that's simply just it's not workable. It would even right now our safety of our country is at jeopardy. We can't just open up the doors in the name of humanity. We believe in legal immigration, but right now this is a national security catastrophe. It's a tsunami on our southern border.
And it's leading to the displacement of American citizens, whether it's in jobs they otherwise might have because of illegal immigrants that are taking them. And of course, the people who are taking advantage of those illegal immigrants within the business community, we saw this out of Brooklyn. There's a high school in Brooklyn overnight because of all of the intense storms, James Madison High School, where they brought in nearly 2,000 illegal immigrants to live inside of the high school, at least for the time being, leaving many of these students. They're poor now. Two-thirds of the students there are economically disadvantaged. They're learning from home now. The disaster that we saw during COVID. These are American citizens who are being displaced for illegal immigrants, Senator.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess I found out they're supposed to have a dance this week, and maybe the dance is canceled. And I think about all the tragedies of COVID. Making our kids stay home is one of them. The kids that missed their junior, senior prom, the kids that missed their state track meets, all those types of things came back to mind.
Yeah.
But even America has enough money to do the right things. But we're spending $500 billion a year now taking care of these millions of people that are in the country illegally. And at the end of the day, is that pushing a veteran, down the line? Is that pushing a senior citizen away from the food bank? You're right. We're now putting other people that are illegal in this country ahead of our own citizens. That's not right. It's not fair. No one. I just don't know how some of my friends across the aisle can go to sleep at night. It makes no sense to me. They're backfiring as far as the humanitarian effort. We're now impacting our own people,
yes,
let alone the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, all those things on top.
So tell me about your colleagues across the aisle. Are any of them taking this seriously in your view? I mean, look, this is a small body. 100 senators is not that many people. You know all of them. Do you ever talk, or are things so standoffish that you have no idea what the other side is even contemplating?
Right. We have conversations, and I think quietly some of my colleagues across the aisle are whispering, we hope you all figure this out. We hope we figure out a way to secure the border and fix this broken immigration system. I think for the most part, though, the White House wants this crisis. They want this tsunami. They want all these people coming across the border. They think there'll be Democrat voters. They get more aid going to those particular districts based upon the census. The census doesn't exclude people if they're have a legal status as well. So there's plenty of chaos up here between trying to keep the government open. We haven't touched on the supplemental bill that the president would like to do as well. I would just say a lot of it's just it's a storm up here as well.
It sure seems
really
like
keeping our heads above water. It is. It is a storm.
This spending package is upsetting a lot of conservatives who are hoping for much better out of the Republicans on the Hill, in particular Speaker Mike Johnson. What do you make of this? The fact that the can was kicked a bunch of times, but it doesn't look like we're getting any meaningful cuts.
No, it's not. It's still $300 billion above pre-COVID type of budget. First of all, Speaker Johnson has the toughest job in the world right now. He's a good friend. I have faith in him that he's doing the very best he can. He was handed a certain hand of cards dealt him, and he can't change that right now. I think what people need to remember is just the budget process is what's broken up here. 2 weeks from now, Joe Biden should be submitting his budget for next year. The Senate Budget Committee should be submitting our budget for next year here the 1st of April. We skip all those steps. So there's about a dozen of my colleagues and myself working on going back to that budget process to force regular order, to force it if we don't meet certain steps, that there'll be some type of punishment for Congress not doing its job. We've sat there since the end of July on the Senate side with all 12 of the buckets of funding having passed out of committee, ready to go to the Senate floor. But Chuck Schumer has said on this, again, just like Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer want an open border, they also want an omnibus. Yes. I see no way we do anything but get to an omnibus. Don't listen to what they say. Watch what we're doing. And in this case, it's the lack of effort. We should be looking at these funding bills one at a time or maybe three at a time. We've done nothing since November on it.
But Senator Roger Marshall, how close are we to disaster, though? I mean, we're over $34 trillion of debt right now. And unlimited, unbelievable amounts of money being printed all the time in order to cover all of the expenses that the government keeps authorizing. How close are we to doom, sir?
Yeah, well, Vince, if you presented your financial ledger to a bank like the government has now, they would not loan you any money. And I'm hesitant to say because I don't know, but I do tell you every day there's more and more senators that we're talking to that are waking up and agree with me that this is the number one, our national debt is the number one long-term threat to our national security, our well-being, whether you want good schools, roads and bridges, or a strong military. The amount of money we're paying in interest now is just unsustainable, that we are upside down. Thank goodness we do have a relatively strong economy, not as strong as the president might be saying, but we're a resilient country. I'm very concerned about it. The first thing we have to do is that we have a spending problem. We got to slow down the spending. It's just that simple. I think if we could slow down the spending and basically go to a flatline budget for 2 or 3 years, we could right this ship.
Yeah, boy, do we need. And by the way, those interest payments now outpace defense spending. We're now paying more on the interest on the debt than we are for the entire United States military. Senator Roger Marshall, thank you very much for your time today. Always appreciate you joining us here on the show, sir.
Yeah, you bet, Vince. Have a great day.
Senator Roger Marshall from the great state of Kansas. Again, introduced that vote of no confidence yesterday for DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, and it was blocked in the Senate because Democrats want the chaos to continue. That's the message that they're sending. It's awful. It's awful. And we do have, as the senator was gracious enough to help promote, Brandon Judd coming up at 5 o'clock today. I've been looking forward to this conversation, looking ahead on this calendar, saying, hey, Mayorkas' impeachment proceedings begin today in the House, as they did. And Brandon Judd is really the best positioned and freest Border Patrol agent in the country when it comes to talking about why Mayorkas needs to be given the boot. You saw it was Kat Kamek, I think, who was over. She was over on one of the Fox networks this week, indicating that they were told behind closed doors by Mayorkas, oh, you get rid of me, you're not going to like who comes next. Well, what does that mean? So Mayorkas is now threatening Republican members of Congress? You think I'm bad? Wait until Joe Biden puts in my replacement. This is all too much. And yet another reason why they should get rid of Mayorkas. It's just the scam needs to end. Brandon Judd will talk to us at 5 o'clock about that. In the meantime, it's 3:20 now. Well, Hunter Biden did it again. He wanted to let the American people know that he is completely above the law. He showed up today at the United States Capitol building in the midst of a hearing on holding him in contempt of Congress over his decision to demonstrate his, that's right, contempt of Congress. When he refused to show up to a lawful subpoena weeks ago, he just stood outside the Capitol building and said, I'm not going in there. No, I'm doing it. If I'm doing it under my own terms, under my own circumstances. They said, no, get your tail inside. That's where you're supposed to be. He refused. He said, up yours, Congress. And then he arrived today for the contempt of Congress proceeding, sat in the very front. He was staging his own little insurrection in the Capitol building to try and make a mockery of the hearing. And then as Marjorie Taylor Greene was beginning to speak, Hunter Biden and his entourage, which included his attorney and his sugar brother, Kevin Morris, that's the Biden campaign donor that's trying to make the Biden family's problems go away. They all stood up together and they stormed out of the conference room. Here is the hearing room. Here is the sound of Hunter Biden fleeing the room and Marjorie Taylor Greene just beginning her remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, Hunter. Apparently you're afraid of my words.
Whoa! Oh.
I'd like to reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
Kind of burst their bubble. Wow, that's too bad.
Hunter Biden heading out. Was that other woman's voice? Was that Nancy Mace? We're not sure about that. We think it may have been Nancy Mace. But somebody else had opened their microphone, and they were all mocking him from the dais, like Statler and Waldorf. They all had various commentary as he led the room. Here is, speaking of Nancy Mace, she said this today, that Hunter Biden should be held completely in contempt. In fact, he should be hauled off to jail.
I believe that Hunter Biden should be held completely in contempt. I think he should be hauled off to jail right now, because it wasn't long ago, too, my friends on the other side of the aisle, that you also believed in the power of a congressional subpoena. Not long ago at all. You believed in holding those who refuse to comply with a congressional subpoena accountable.
And then Nancy Mace directed some comments at Hunter.
Second question, you are the epitome of white privilege, coming into the Oversight Committee, spitting in our face, ignoring a congressional subpoena to be deposed. What are you afraid of? You have no balls to come up here and...
Mr. Chairman, point of inquiry.
And Democrats getting upset. So let me just point out something that's super cringe that Nancy Mace just did. You are the epitome of white privilege? Please. Just please. What is this stupid left-wing talking point? No, wrong. He is the epitome of Democrat privilege. He is the epitome of the powerful elite privilege, getting away with anything they want to. Anything, including going into that congressional building and just straight up giving them the double-barrel middle finger, saying, I'm not going to be a part of this process. That's what happened today. Of course, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Democrat, she got all upset. The Democrat, she's like, how dare a Republican invoke white privilege? And it just became dumber and dumber.
I just want to run it back, though, to the very beginning, because this is something that I just can't get over. I can't get over the gentle lady from South Carolina talking about white privilege.
Me neither, Congresswoman.
It was a spit in the face, at least of mine as a black woman,
stop.
For you to talk about what white privilege looks like, especially from that side of the aisle.
Okay, you both need to be in timeout. Get out of here. Follow Hunter out the door. You think about what you did. Congressman Pat Fallon, part of that Oversight Committee, of course. He'll be with us coming up in just moments to talk about what he witnessed today amidst the chaos. Good afternoon. 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Brad Wenstrup talks to us about 2 days of questioning with Anthony Fauci this week and how Fauci suddenly forgets the entire pandemic. And Brandon Judd is here at 5 o'clock, the Border Patrol Union president. We will talk to him about why Mayorkas needs to be thrown out of the government. That's ahead. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Hunter Biden showed up on Capitol Hill today for a publicity stunt, not to be helpful in any way, but to once again defy a congressional subpoena. As he was fleeing the oversight hearing room, a reporter asked him this.
Hunter, what's your favorite type of crack? Are you on crack today?
Hunter, what's your favorite type of crack? Are you on crack today? Comma, because you must be if you think what just happened was a good idea. That's really what that question implies. Here to talk about what did take place during that oversight hearing is a man who was there. Congressman Pat Fallon represents Texas's 4th Congressional District and joins us on the phone. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir.
Vince, how are you doing?
Good. This strikes me as the latest iteration of Hunter Biden giving Congress the double-barrel middle fingers.
Double-barrel middle fingers, and he's just a circus everywhere the guy goes. I heard now that he's making a documentary, and this was just some footage they needed. He's trying to portray himself as a sympathetic figure. He's a bum. He's always been a bum. He's always about himself. So let me amend my comment. He's a narcissistic bum. And it's an interesting question. I wonder if he was on crack, because it was really a bad idea. But, it spun the Democrats up into a tizzy.
Yeah, it sure did. No, you're right about this documentary thing. So this goes back to his financier, Kevin Morris, this guy who meets him in December of 2019 in the midst of the campaign. He meets Hunter at a Biden campaign event for donors. Then all of a sudden, now they're friends, and he's paying off all of the Biden family's tax liabilities. And it looks like he's trying to recoup his money a bit by financing a documentary. and then having cameras travel around with Hunter literally everywhere. Everything is a spectacle with these guys.
Yeah, that's all he cares about. I mean, I think it's kind of funny, ironic and funny in a sad way about what's happening. I just stepped out of the hearing to take your call, Vince. And the Democrats are doing three things. First thing is that principle of deny, counter accuse. So they're trying to obfuscate why we're here. We're having a hearing today to hold Hunter Biden in contempt because a lawful subpoena went out for him to appear for a deposition, and he decided that he didn't need to show up because I guess his last name was Biden, so he hasn't. So they're saying, number one, yeah, I know. They're telling me that we have to go and vote, so I'll be quick. But then they're saying because Jamie Comer, in an interview, happened to mention that, yeah, we'd love to have him in for public testimony. They said, well, he was here. He's ready for public testimony. Let me tell your listeners what they're lying about, okay? When somebody comes in for public testimony, each member of Congress gets 5 minutes. There's roughly 60 of us on the committee. So you're talking about 5 hours of testimony, 2.5 hours of which will be done by Democrats. So there'll be softballs that'll just use their time to attack President Trump. When you have a deposition in a private setting, you could go on for hundreds of hours. You can really drill down and get an in-depth analysis and interviews, and they can't just run the clock out on you because the clock is really indefinite. And then from there, when you have 200 or 300 hours, if needed, of testimony, then while we can read that testimony, then we can really fine-tune our questions in the public setting. But what they're saying is he's ready to testify, yeah, because he doesn't want to go through hundreds of hours of grueling testimony. He just wants to have his 2.5-hour circus.
Right.
And then they're talking about President Trump owning international hotels and how I guess if a Saudi stays at one of those hotels, it constitutes bribery. It's just insane. It's insane and it's absurd because they don't want to talk about the issue at hand.
Right, and it's standard practice to do the deposition first, correct?
It is. That is absolute process. And that's what, ironically, the ranking member, Jamie Raskin from Maryland, was saying when they were in the majority that Republican members, of Donald Trump's family, they needed to go testify in private first, and then they would have public testimony. Now they're singing from a different sheet of music.
So what precedent, I know you have to run, Congressman, but what precedent is being set here? If Democrats take over again and they demand somebody who's aligned with the Republicans to show up in the form of a subpoena, can that person now defy that subpoena safely and not worry about what Congress wants?
No, that's what the president they're setting. And they're also trying to argue that the Republicans are being hypocritical because some members, some sitting members of Congress were subpoenaed by, the January 6th committee, which was not a properly constituted committee. That is not a bipartisan committee. Nancy Pelosi appointed every member, including the two most Democratic members, which were Liz Cheney and I even forget the other idiot's name that they both work for CNN now, whatever the guy's name was, the two quote-unquote Republicans. But the way a committee is constituted, we have a ratio, and if you're in the majority, then you have more members than the other. But you decide, your leadership on the Democratic side decides who sits on that committee, and then the Republicans decide who sits on that committee for the Republican seats. The January 6th committee was not constituted that way. Nancy Pelosi decided who was on that committee. And then furthermore, they could have pursued contempt charges, but they didn't because they knew they wouldn't get anywhere. So it's a completely different issue.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, it was like a left-wing book club was given subpoena power somehow. It's pretty crazy. Congressman Pat Fallon, I know you got to run for these votes, so thank you for your time today, sir. Really appreciate your call.
Thanks, Vince. Remember, deny, counter accuse. That's what the Democrats do.
Well, they're sure kicking up a lot of dirt. All right, there's the congressman. He's running off to votes now. Stepped out for a moment to talk to this audience. We're grateful for that. And he was in the midst of this oversight hearing today as Hunter Biden arrived. The whole point was to contemplate contempt of Congress for Hunter Biden, and Hunter shows up to make it into a spectacle. And if you are a member of the media who is falling for this, you're a sucker or a serpent or both, because this is, once again, just a flat-out rejection of the American people and their will when it comes to, look, they put these people in charge in Congress. One of the things they have is a subpoena power. They can use it. Should you get one, you've got to respond to it. You've got to go. Hunter Biden has refused because he is convinced with some evidence that he's above the law. He doesn't have to follow it. It doesn't apply to him. It applies to everybody else. Trump is beneath the law. Hunter Biden is above it. Pat Fallon did have a number of questions. Now that he's gone, let me play some of the audio for you so you can hear from him today. This is after Hunter had left the room, but Pat Fallon was quick with some of the questions he might ask should he have the opportunity.
I have never met anybody in business that pocketed seed money. It's the lifeblood of your venture. Why did you take millions from foreign entities? And who was the big guy? Mr. Hunter Biden, was it your dad? 10% for the big guy? When you said in that WhatsApp message that I'm sitting right here with my father, was your father really there? Will you give up your geolocations on your phone with your dad so we can determine if you guys were actually in the same room at that time? Why did you email your daughter or text her and tell her about, boy, I wish I didn't have to give 50% of my salary to dad? This all is just questions that under a deposition, when we have hundreds of hours, we could ask this. And I'm only one member of a committee of 60. I'm sure my colleagues would have plenty of questions as well. So this is what it's about. It's about justice. And think about who you're defending here. He's not worthy of your defense.
Fox's Hillary Vaughn chased Hunter Biden down in the hallway as Hunter Biden was fleeing the room, having successfully completed his insurrection-style stunt. And here's the exchange they had. Hillary did ask, hey, why'd you put your dad on speakerphone during all of these business negotiations? Here's Hunter's nonsensical answer.
Why did you show up today? Why did you put your dad on speakerphone if he had nothing to do with your business? You put him on speakerphone multiple times to talk to your business partners. Why did you do that?
I'm right next to
Are you on crack today?
You hear the guy asking the crack question.
Don't stop.
Yes. But why did you need to talk to him during business meetings if he had nothing to do with your business? Everybody stop.
Okay. As you can tell, very difficult to hear the exchange. I do have a transcript of the remarks between Hillary Vaughn and Hunter Biden today. Here's how it went down. She said, Mr. Biden, why did you put your dad on speakerphone if he had nothing to do with your business? You put him on speakerphone multiple times and talked to your business partners. Why did you do that? Biden responded to her, just be careful, he said, and he was apparently warning about a tripping hazard in the crowd as they were walking. She repeated the question, Mr. Biden, why did you put your dad on speakerphone with your business partners if he had no involvement in your business? Biden responded, you have a dad. Does he call you? Vaughn says, yes. Hunter says, does he answer the phone? She said, yes. He goes, okay. And then she reiterated the question, but why did you need to talk to him during business meetings if he had nothing to do with your business? Apparently, he did not offer any answer to that. So Hunter's excuse here is like, well, I just call my dad. Really? In the middle of a business negotiation, you just happen to call your father all the time and put him on the phone with the family's business partners? Can you explain it in a little more detail? This is not as simply like, hey, I've got some time. Let me call my dad, check in today. That's not the issue. This is something very different. Also, remember, this is one of those quick hallway interviews where you ask, nobody was really quite prepared for him to be there. Nobody was quite prepared for him to flee the room at the same time. So she cobbles together a quick question. Why were you on the speakerphone? But one I might ask is what Pat Fallon just enunciated, which is, tell us about this threat to a business partner where your father was involved. Was your father really sitting next to you? What kind of pain was he going to bring if you didn't get millions of dollars out of this Biden family business partner in China? Tell us about the big guy. Did you routinely refer to your father as the big guy in all of these communications? Sure seems that way. And on and on. So there's a lot here. But Hunter Biden creating a big spectacle on Capitol Hill today. He's above the law, of course. Let us take a phone call now. I've got Justin in North Carolina, line 2. Justin, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. I just wanted to make a little comment or ask a question. You referred to this guy, Kevin Morris, as Biden's sugar daddy.
Yes.
But from what I understand, he is his lawyer, and he is also the person that Hunter divested his 10% of a $1.5 billion investment from China. So this guy, Kevin Morris, is really just holding the Biden-China money pocketbook, and he's only paying their bills with their own money that came from China.
Yeah, he's such an interesting figure. So the phrase is sugar brother. The New York Post has been running with this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And the way this all goes down, as I mentioned a moment ago to Congressman Pat Fallon, and I want to get into some more detail on this because I think this guy is one of the most fascinating elements in this entire saga. He met Hunter at a donor event for the Biden campaign back in December of 2019. They weren't longtime friends. This wasn't like some high school buddy who happens to have a lot of money now who's helping Hunter pay off his tax bills. No, this was a Biden campaign donor, someone who had already maxed out his contributions to the Biden campaign. He meets Hunter. He decides to essentially take over all of Hunter's financial liabilities, to pay all of them off, to begin paying all of his living expenses, to pay all of his travel expenses, to pay everything from his paternity case in Arkansas to housing him in California, apparently paying for the art studio that Hunter was using to create all of this art that he would go on to sell to, you guessed it, Kevin Morris. There is something deeply, deeply corrupt about all of this. And as you point out, Justin, and in fact, you're reminding me of it. I had forgotten this, but it is maybe the most important point. And when the Biden administration began, Hunter had a massive equity stake investment in a Chinese firm. And he did not divest. There was a promise early on in the administration. Oh, yeah, Hunter's going to divest. Hunter's going to divest. This is a huge problem. Because if you are invested in a major company in China, what that means is that the Chinese government wields control over that investment. And so as a result, there's a huge conflict of interest to have the first son be so heavily invested in an equity stake in this big Chinese company. So they said, oh, they're going to divest. When it finally occurred, he divested to Kevin Morris. Kevin Morris owns his equity stake now in all of this. So it is a very tangled web of money that all involves this guy, Kevin Morris, this Hollywood attorney, who was sitting right next to Hunter today inside of that congressional stunt. He's the guy who looks like Jeff Bridges in The Big Lebowski. He's like sitting right next to Hunter Biden today. He's following him around with a camera crew all over the place to generate a documentary, a sympathetic documentary on Hunter Biden's life. So, man, Justin, this guy just keeps popping up, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I think he keeps popping up with basically part of $150 million worth of what Hunter got out of his 10% of $1.5 billion from China, which is $150 million plus profit, whatever it's profited or grown since then.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Thank you for bringing that up, Justin. I really appreciate that call today from North Carolina. Yeah, I want to dig in a little bit more on this Kevin Morris character. A wise point about how he owns Hunter Biden's equity stake in this Chinese company. BHR is the name of the company. Back in May of last year, the incomparable Andrew Kerr and Chuck Ross over at the Washington Free Beacon reporting that business records now reveal that Biden's stake in that Chinese private equity firm is controlled by Hollywood super lawyer Kevin Morris, who is also paying for one of Biden's cars, according to court proceedings at that time. The revelation casts doubt on the first son's claim that he divested from his foreign business interests after his father pledged that his family members would do so. Hunter's legal team told the New York Times in November of 2021, quote, he no longer holds any interest directly or indirectly in either BHR or in his own firm, Skeneedles. Morris's control of Skeneedles, which holds Biden's 10% stake in the Chinese private equity firm, also raises the possibility that the first son handed off his piece of the firm as payment for legal representation as he engages in a bitter court battle over custody payments to the young daughter he has worked to disclaim. That's the daughter that Joe Biden refused to admit existed until he was shamed into doing it because he's a bad person. It's insane. Yeah. Also, all of the colluding with the White House to destroy Trump is really coming into stark relief, isn't it? All of these left-wing attorneys all across the country, turns out they keep popping up in the White House visitor logs. Yeah, they're definitely coordinating with the Biden administration. The details as they break today, all ahead on the Vince Colonnese Show.